This is a wonderful day today here for us. We've got things to think of. I feel good when I look out the windows and I see the sun and the limbs with the leaves and the color. And that just gives you a better feeling. And it's even better than that when you're here for a story and we know that we're going to hear something different, something new, and something wonderful. And Jane Dorfman has brought it to us. You know, Jane has been here with us on this program a number of times, and it's always a treat. And she has a blessed new story. What's this all about?
What's this all about? Well, I became a long time ago really entranced with Calamity Jane. Now, I don't know because she and I have the same first name, but I just have always really been interested in it. And the more I read about her, and I must own like this many books on a bookshelf about Calamity Jane, I just got more and more interested. You know, she kind of lived at the tail end of the Wild West. She came west in a covered wagon and she lived to see the railroads and electric lights and a lot of changes, you know, so she's just an interesting character. And then there's the whole history of, you know, the dime novels and people's perception of the West and Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody. And it's just somebody I just really got interested in.
Well, see, I'm interested in how you're doing this because I know about her, but it started out when I was about 15 years old in a movie. And she was a young girl singing in the, in a circus kind of thing. And I never changed my attitude toward her.
Yes. And I think Debbie Reynolds played her, which if you have ever seen a picture of Calamity Jane, there could be few people who look less like Debbie Reynolds than Calamity Jane. She was not an attractive woman. She was somewhat mannish. She was big. You know, she was not this cute little person.
So you then wanted to know more, and you
wanted to know more. And it's really hard to find out more because there's so much. I think every time somebody would buy her a drink, she would spin them a story, and it didn't matter whether it was true. And these dime novels that were published back east took up her and Wild Bill Hickok and just made them the heroes of what were the comic books of their day. And I mean, sometimes if you look at newspaper records, you know, I think when there was a slow news day, they'd put, oh, Calamity Jane came to town. And on the same day, Calamity Jane came to town 200 miles away. You know, she wasn't in both places at once. And so it was interesting to do the research.
Well, now you have before you get started, I'm going to ask you another question.
Okay.
Because I think that we who are listening to a storyteller need to know a little bit about how they went about it. And so how did you now know her story? You were reading, you're researching. How did you figure out what would work for you being her?
Yeah.
How would you handle it?
How did I handle that? Well, I had started to tell it just as like a narration. This is Calamity Jane was such and such. And then, you know, she got so little chance to tell her own story, especially after she died, of course, but, you know, it was just carried away with silly movies and musicals. And that I thought it would be nice to have it in her own voice. And I don't put on a voice. I don't try to sound like her, but I try to sound things that she might have said.
So you feel her?
I do. I really, I think I channel her sometimes.
Oh, that's great. Here she is. She's going to be in story with us today. How would you like to start telling us about her, with her, or however you want?
No, I would like to give me a minute to you talk and I'll put on a different shirt and then I'll be right back.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I think now when Jane told me that I had not heard her really begin to perform it. But I was very excited when she told me what she had developed and how comfortable she felt with it, that I've been really curious. I did see early movies that don't have anything related to what's going on with the real history. And so she's bringing us something that's strong, that's new, and that we can look at a story differently when the real person comes with you. And that person doesn't have to look exactly like a picture that you wanted. No, it comes from the inside, from the heart, I think. That someone has learned it, someone has thought about it, and we're really grateful to hear it today. Oh my goodness, I love it.
Me too. Me too.
I do. I love the look.
I had bought this weird shirt at a thrift store ages ago, and it just seemed like the perfect shirt for Jane.
Tell us just one moment about the hat. How did you choose the hat?
I have some pictures of her in what were known as drover's hats, which were not exactly cowboy hats, but sort of flat. If I didn't like the hat so much, I would have distressed it a little bit more and made it look beat up and old. Because she clearly, I wonder if you guys can see this photograph.
Yes.
So you see that hat
on her head?
Yeah. That was Jane standing in front of Wild Bill Hickok's grave.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot. She loved getting her picture taken. I have a lot of pictures to look at.
Great.
Yeah.
Now it's to you.
Now it's to me. Okay. Well, I am real pleased to be here this afternoon, and I'm even more pleased to be getting paid for it. And I thank you, Ladies Auxiliary, for asking me to come. I hadn't been back to Deadwood in a long time, and it's nice to see you all out here. I wonder if any of you were in that scissors brigade. No? Well, I was back a while back, and I was in the bar, and some ladies came in with their little sewing scissors, and they said since I had on men's clothes, I didn't deserve to have long hair, and they were going to cut it off. Now, all the men in the bar, they didn't dare touch these ladies, but I kicked them all out. I think I still have a pair of their scissors, too. You don't look too familiar with that incident, so maybe it was your mother's or your grandmother's. Well, the organizer has very kindly collected in this cigar box some questions. But I thought I would start and correct what she said, because she introduced me as Martha Jane Cannary. Now, that is the name my parents gave me, and they gave me precious little else, but I go by Calamity Jane. And if you want to be really formal, you could call me Mrs. Burke. Now, don't be rolling those eyes. It was a legitimate marriage, though where he is now, I really can't say. And as for the calamity, well, some people say it was because I was ready to help in any calamity, and other people say I was ready to cause one wherever I went. I don't know which one got stuck. And as for the Jane, well, the fella I had taken up with already had a wife named Martha, and he didn't want to get too confused. So that's how I got Calamity Jane. And it stood me in good stead. It's a good name. So I'm going to look at some of these questions that you all gave me. You have such nice handwritings. So this one says, am I going to have another party? Well, one of the last times I came into Deadwood, I had a little girl with me. And I told people she was my daughter, which was not really true. She was the daughter of a friend of mine who died. And I got the idea that we would have a big benefit party for her, like we did for Charlie Hanks when his water turned black. And I came to town and I got the Green Front Saloon. You guys remember the Green Front Saloon? It was the shoddiest saloon in town. And they got some paint, but they only had enough to the front. Of course, it's burned down years ago, but they shut down to all their regular customers for the whole night. And we sold tickets and people bought them, even people who would never dream of coming to a saloon. We had a great party. My friend Dora Dufresne and all her fancy ladies came and danced with everybody. And we had not one, but two piano players. And when one of them got drunk and started playing songs like "Whisper Softly, Mother's Dying, Gentle Eyes Begin to Close," well, we'd shove him off the stool and we put on the other one and he would play Camptown Ladies and the dancing would go on. And there was a lot of drinking and people got the money away from me before I could treat the whole world to drinks. It was a grand party. We had enough money to send that little girl off to St. Martin's Catholic School. We had enough money to send her to Oberlin. Shoot, she was a nice little girl. She wanted to stay with me. She was real sad to leave, but I had to tell her that I was going through a good spell, but that I knew it wasn't going to last. So she went off to school. She wrote to me for a long time. She may still be writing to me for all I know. It was a little sad to let go of that child. And I hear a little whispering from you all that wasn't there a real daughter? Well, yeah, there was. I did have a daughter long before I came and had that party. I had taken up with this guy, and I had never fallen with child before, and I didn't even know what it was. And by the time anybody told me, well, it was too late to do anything about it. Dora Dufran let me come and stay in her body house, and I had the baby there. It was a little girl. She was real small. And people said it was because I hadn't been eating well while I was carrying her, but that just wasn't true. Because all those girls in the house, they would get me glasses of milk, great big glasses of thick white milk. I don't know where they were finding that milk, but they were all so pleased to come and present me with that glass, and I would have to drink it down. Yeah, I still don't like milk. And they loved the baby. They loved toting her around and carrying and talking to her. They kept bringing her back. And just as I'd be sitting down to have a drink or a chat with somebody, here they come with the baby again. Well, after a while, Dora decided that having her girls all cooing over the baby and showing each other how to crochet little baby bonnets was not quite the atmosphere that her customers were expecting. So the baby and I moved out to a little shack, really. That first winter, it was so cold. And the snow was so deep, people sort of forgot we were there. And then the baby got croup and she got real sick. And I made my way through the snow to the doctor. And he told me real frankly, he said, Miss Jane, this baby's not going to live unless you find her some other place. So I asked him if he knew somebody who would take her in. And he asked around, and he found a real nice couple who had lost a child years back and never had any more. And so they adopted her. And they were real good to her. She learned to play the piano. She went to school. She got so upright and prim, she didn't want to see me anymore. I used to sneak by and kind of stand outside the fence and look at her and see what she was doing. I didn't want to embarrass her, but she grew to be a fine, upright young woman. But she can't deny me. She looks exactly like me, except that her eyes are a little bit crossed there in the middle. And she inherited something else from me too. I hear that she is a crack shot with a rifle, just like me. I was always a good shot. The first time I picked up that rifle, I could hit anything I wanted. And she's the same way. I was good with a whip too. I could take those long bull whips. I would drive those teams of oxen, 20 harnessed together. And we would pull these big freight loads into town. This was before the railroad. And you got them going by flicking the ear of the lead ox just to get it moving. I saw a fellow once abusing a tired animal, and I flicked off his hat with that whip. And I told him next time it would be his ear. Yeah, he didn't dare frown at those animals after that. It was a long time ago. It was before the railroad came through. It was before you guys got those fancy macadam roads there. Deadwood was a whole different place back then. Anyway, so let me see what else we got in here. Was you ever, your grandma, ladies, is not the best. Was you ever an Indian scout? No, I was not an Indian scout. I always got along real well with the Indians. But I did once go out with General Crook's expedition, sort of in disguise. I'd gone out there, joining in with the men, and somehow my clothes got wet, and the men lent me a uniform, and I put it on. And General Crook came by. He was inspecting the troops, and I gave him a snappy salute, and everybody began to laugh. And he whirled around and wanted to know what people were laughing at, and they pointed out that he had just saluted Calamity Jane. He sent me right back to town. Besides being a real SOB to the Indians, that man had no sense of humor. He really didn't. Oh, here's another one. That's none of your business. We're going to throw that one out of the box. Dime novels. Were you a heroine of dime novels? I was, completely against my will. There's this fella named Ned Wheeler. He's never been west of the Mississippi. And he writes all these books, these comic books, these little illustrated pictures books about me and Wild Bill. And he's never met me. He calls me Calamity Jane, the heroine of Whoop Up. Did you ever hear anything so stupid? He has me with long red hair and a little waist this big. That man has done a lot. Well, he's done a little bit for me because when I go into a town, everybody wants to meet me. They want to stand at the bar and hear stories. They want to buy me drinks. So I guess I have a little bit of appreciation for Ned Wheeler. Here is another question. It says, can you tell me about Wild Bill Cody? Now you guys need to learn that there is Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody, only one of which was really Bill. And Cody was, you know him, his face is everywhere across the West. His Wild West show came to every town. They even went to England, I hear. And his big face was plastered up with that white mustache and that long, pretty hair. He had a beautiful white stallion for a long time, only it was killed in a train wreck. He was a good friend to me. He hired me and he tried to make it so I could stay in his show, but I was not going through one of my better spells and I had to leave. But I saw him again. I went all the way to the World's Fair in New York State. I wasn't in the fair itself, but I was on the midway. And some woman published up a little memoir of mine that I could sell. And I did a little trick shooting and I did a little riding. I had a horse back then that I would take a bow and the horse would bow. It just wowed the crowds. But when I needed to get back to Deadwood, Bill was the one who put up the money for the train. All I really got out of that was a fine pair of leather boots. So Cody was a good friend. He was a good man. Now, Wild Bill Hickok, and we don't ever know where the Bill came from because his name was James Butler Hickok. He was the love of my life. I don't think he knew it, but there was a time when Bill and me and Charlie Utter, we had matching fringe jackets. There was enough fringe on those jackets to make rope, and we came riding into Deadwood. And in my mind, we were on matching white horses, and I'm not sure that was true. But that was a grand day. Bill was a pretty man. He had that beautiful mustache and those long flowing curls. And Charlie Utter, he was no slouch. He had black curly hair. They were just so good looking. I was the plainest one of the bunch. Kind of hurt my feelings. Yes, it did. Bill was shot in Deadwood. You probably know that. He was shot playing poker. He was shot in the back. And he was holding a hand of black aces and black eights. And everybody now calls that a dead man's hand. Jack McCall shot him because he said Bill killed his brother. Well, Bill was a marshal, and his method of marshaling was if you disagreed with him, he shot you dead. I know I have told in the past that I chased Jack McCall down the street with a meat cleaver, but that's not true either. I was in Lead or somewhere. I didn't even come back till I heard Bill was dead. I told Bill's friends that I wanted to be buried next to Bill, and they just laughed at him. Me. Some of them were such snakes. They said that Bill washed his hair and took a bath every day, and that he wouldn't have touched me with a 10-foot pole. But I have a plan to get around him. I've been practicing my deathbed speech. I'm going to say as I'm going out, bury me next to Bill. And who's going to deny a woman her last words? I'll get there yet. I'm sure of it. He was not exactly a good man, but he was a wonderful man. And he'll never, nobody will ever forget him. That's the truth. Oh, let's take another question. Did I ever rob a bank? No, I never robbed a bank. The most I ever robbed was the grocery store. And that was because I had gone up in the mountains to nurse this cabin full of miners who were all sick with mountain fever. And I got up there and they were all hot and fevered and half dead. And there was not a speck of food in that cabin. And I looked to see if there was a little bag of gold dust or some nuggets. I couldn't find anything. So I went back down the mountain and I went to the general store and I gathered a box of supplies and I put it up on the counter, and he toted up the bill. And when he told me what it was, I just laid my 6-gun next to the box and I said, those boys will pay you when they're better. And I'm taking this food. So I took the food up to the miners and they did get better, and I cleaned up all the puke all over the cabin and nursed them until they were back on their feet. And I hope they paid the store, but I don't know for sure. So I did my name, the party, and Wild Bill and Buffalo Bill. So I'm getting a little dry. And don't offer me any water, because it's not water that's going to cure this thirst. But I want to thank you very much for listening and tell you goodbye.
As a storyteller, I really honor what you did in order to get that person out there. And it's something that it's hard to do. How did you manage to decide which way you were going to go with her?
Well, I wanted to get in all these little pieces of facts and to weave it into a story, or even just a narrative, to have her do it. And so I came on the idea of sort of Calamity Jane gives a TED talk. And, I thought, how can she get questions? And so the ladies auxiliary has gathered questions for her ahead of time. And then I read them out. And it doesn't matter. I don't really read the questions, but it wouldn't matter what order they came in, because those are all things I'm going to talk about. So that comes out a little bit different every time.
Right. Was there really, you said there are many, many books about her. How were those books going? Because they must have been a different view.
Well, some of them, like that incident of her saluting General Crook.
Yes.
That was in somebody's letter home, a soldier's letters home. So that's a real reliable fact. He wrote that to his family as a little funny incident. Oh, guess what? General Crook saluted Calamity Jane. So we have that as fact. There was some other people, and I couldn't figure out why they wrote the book on her, because they seemed to have hated her. And even like when she nursed the miners, she just wanted the money, or she was just doing it for show. And she did a lot of things like that. She risked getting smallpox to go take care of people.
So was it mostly men or women?
She was out there probably wildly outnumbered, especially when she first went, wildly outnumbered by men, because Deadwood was a mining camp.
But I mean, for the writing, for the people that
the writing, it kind of varies. There's some books written like in the 40s by men, and there's I'm trying to think of the earliest one. And then there's some that Jane and a bunch of other people, Calamity Jane and the Lady Wildcats is one of them. Wow. And then in the 20s, a woman came forward. She was on the radio on Mother's Day, and she claimed to be the daughter of Calamity Jane and Wild Bill Hickok. And people looked at her, and they said she just wasn't old enough to be the daughter of Wild Bill Hickok, who died a long time ago. And she supposedly had she did say she had a marriage certificate that was written up on a page torn out of a Bible and signed by a minister that supposedly Jane and Bill met while riding across the plains. And then when somebody researched that, the minister was the same one who had married Wild Bill Hickok to Agnes Lake 6 weeks earlier. And you would think that Wild Bill Hickok was a pretty memorable person, and that he would not have conducted a whole nother marriage. So there's stuff, people have really analyzed these things. And then there's wonderful books on those dime novels, not just the ones about Jane, but they're really fun to look at.
Yeah, but one of the things I thought as I listened to you and you talked about your research and this sort of thing, one of the things you didn't tell us at the opening, you are a professional librarian.
I'm retired. Yeah. And I've also written a book on Calamity Jane, which is yet to get published.
That gave you extra skills.
That gave me some extra, certainly gave me access to a bunch of interlibrary loans. There is a wonderful little book called Old Deadwood Days. And that's where I got the information for the party, because the woman who wrote it was a little girl of 12 when Calamity Jane had that party.
Yeah.
And her father was the town judge, so that she was kind of in on all the politics of the town. And, she didn't go to the party, but she heard about the party, and she heard people complaining that Jane kept the whole town up all night with her party. And she saw the little girl who was going to be sent to school. So that was another really reliable source. And it's just a wonderful read besides.
I really congratulate you on the way that you're telling that story.
Thank
Because
you.
that stuff is hard,
Yeah.
at least that's my opinion, I do a few of those
I
things.
know you do some wonderful nurses and telephone operators.
Yes, the
That's
nurses are
great.
the people I loved,
Mhm.
and they all came from letters, just like you talked about. But there's something really ripe in the thinking. Did you experience that? You get rich with the feeling about the people that you're trying to bring alive.
I find that I love all these details, and some of it is I've made up stuff, but sometimes I have pictured it so clearly um, that it's hard for me to remember sometimes that, no, you made that, like the glasses of milk. You made that up, Jane, but yeah, I know. Um, and what is, you know, historically documented. So I try to be clear, especially when there are things that some people have reported, like Calamity Jane chasing Jack McCall with the meat cleaver. Didn't
Yeah.
happen. But even she is now admitting that that hadn't happened for real.
But you didn't stretch it. You didn't just slash it right out of your story, which is interesting, I think.
Mhm.
I didn't know how that was going. You're helping us understand where this all came from, and it was really wonderful
Oh,
to
thank you.
allow that to stay in there, not to start off blathing that it wasn't real. It was just,
Yeah.
who knows? Who really knows?
Who really knows? Yeah. Yeah. And she, told a lot of different stories, a lot of different, made up stuff. And somebody, there's a very sweet little book called Calamity Jane's Letters to Her Daughter, which are absolutely made up. They're just fiction. They're nice to read, but Calamity Jane didn't write those and hang on to them for 40 years. She just didn't have that kind of lifestyle.
Right, right.
But she did have a real daughter. And she did have a daughter who, I'm going to see if you can see that, a daughter who looked just like her.
Yeah. Who is the man?
That's Calamity Jane.
That's the man.
That's Calamity Jane in the hat and her daughter in the sort of jumper.
Oh, okay. Because the way her hair is pulled back.
Her hair is pulled back. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
she worked, she did men's work. She needed to wear men's clothes. She rode horses. Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes you have pictures of her in skirts and little silly, frilly hats, but mostly she was more dressed in a more manly way.
How long did it take you to get her together inside you?
Inside, I don't know. I think I've been doing it a long time. Like I said, I do have this book written. So I have been writing dialogue for Calamity Jane and thinking about what motives Calamity Jane might have had for bringing that child to Deadwood. She thought it would get more money for her education if she claimed it was her daughter. It's just an interesting person.
I think you're an interesting person.
No, thank you.
By coming across this character that's not bigly popular.
But everybody knows her name.
And yeah, they know that, but you've got her down, as a person.
And even in her life, she was like, the Wild West had changed so much that she was like one of the little last vestiges. And she was, people would, oh, Calamity Jane's here. I want to see her. And she did get buried next to Bill. Those were her dying words, bury me next to Bill. His friends insisted that they put her outside the fence that's around his grave. Because not only did they have to guard his body, because people kept coming and trying to cut off pieces of his hair, they had to build a fence around his monument because people would come as tourists and try to chip off little pieces.
Was he already married, or
He
were
was
they?
married to Agnes Lake, yeah, for some
Yeah,
time. She was I don't know what she was somehow in the theater. Maybe she was like a producer or something.
yeah. So there was a relationship,
There
probably
was he was
between
married, yeah.
the two of them. But I mean,
He
between,
knew Jane, but I don't think it ever went too much beyond that.
yeah. But she had a crush on him.
She had a fine fantasy life about Wild Bill Hickok. Yeah.
How are we? I don't have a clock in front of me, and so do
We're at
you know?
2:55.
2:55.
Yeah.
All right, talk for a minute. I would like to ask you, you've really collected this character that I would be amazed if it's not really popular for you. And you'll keep working on it.
Yeah, it can be longer, she can take more questions. She could rattle on about the daughter. There are more stories about the real daughter. Um, people have tried to track down the little girl that was sent to school, but that was a convent school, and that burned down all their records. Those buildings were wood.
Right.
Deadwood burned several times. There's no newspaper archives left from those days.
You told us that you worked for a long time. You've been working for a long time on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're telling the story, which one do you like to do best?
Well, I really like the story, and it's I'm not that I love the book. The book is a children's novel. It's about the little girl who was sent to school. But I really am enjoying. I've only done this story twice, but I'm really enjoying Calamity Jane, and I'm
Now,
looking forward to doing it standing up.
any of the persons that come out, what my wish is that any people that come out and hear you telling that story are going to want to watch you do more. They're going to
Maybe.
watch you tell them. Well, I was fortunate enough with the nurses when I was doing that World War I, and
Hmm.
you love them, and the more that people heard them, the more they sent you on to have all, and I miss them dreadfully.
Yeah, those were your friends. Yeah.
Yes, when I'm not telling their story. And
Right.
do you have that feeling about
Yeah, when I get to her death, it's a little sad because she died, you know, nobody could help her out of this alcoholism. She died sick
no,
and alone. She wasn't even in Deadwood. She was a few miles away in Lead, spelled Lead. I don't know why it's pronounced like that, but you know, people tried. They tried to, like, Buffalo Bill Cody gave her jobs. He tried more than once. She couldn't be a reliable performer if she got to drinking.
how old was she when she died? If you told
There's a
me.
little question about when she was born, but I think she was about 48. She looked a lot older. I mean, they just had a hard life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't nearly as gray as me, but she was still dark haired.
You don't know what kind of dye she had.
I bet she did. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, put the
and I
hair.
think, when you think about, she had this illegitimate child, she was probably abused by various men and
Okay.
left, but I don't have the impression that she felt sorry for herself. I don't ever have that impression.
Well, since we're coming sort of to the end of this, would you put your hat back on? I just don't. People are going to enjoy. I believe in that hat.
In
It's
that character,
beautiful
yeah, I
on
should
you,
put it
Jane.
back a little further.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful. How do you feel when you get
I
into?
feel a little silly in the hat.
Oh, no.
I'm okay in the shirt and the bandana, which I researched, and bandanas were first sold in 1878. So this is historically accurate.
Yeah.
But I do tell a few other first person stories. I do Mary Culhane, a scary story. I do an Irish story as the main character, but I put a shawl on for that, but I don't really costume. I mean, this is
But it's
fun.
it's like putting on your character.
Yeah, it
But
helps.
it's not like you're overdressing. I don't see that. People would be easy to come up to you and to talk to you.
Yeah, and I could even put this on, well, in front of people. I could just button up the shirt, put on the bandana, put on the hat. Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah,
Take off the glasses.
I love it. What do you think she is thought of as a character? Is this a women of history?
I think it's more and more, it is a women's liberation thing. The name you know, the name is probably half why we remember her, Calamity Jane. I mean, it's just a great name to be stuck on somebody. And, you know, she was a wild character and she did her own thing, and she, you know, was not gonna, I mean, she probably worked, she did, I know she worked as a washerwoman occasionally. She probably also worked occasionally as a prostitute. I mean, she needed to do what she could do to get money and to continue to live. Though, as you see, she wasn't anybody's beauty, so she was probably not really into those feminine jobs.
Well, yeah, but it just, we could talk about that for a while, but
Yeah, yeah.
she had to get her money. I
You
mean,
had to
she
get money. Yeah, there's a scene
had a
which is not in
child.
here, but I could put it in there other times. There was a band of outlaws up in the hills, and she baked pies for them all winter and charged them $5 a pie, which is really a huge amount of money back then. So, you know,
Right.
gave her some of their bank robber loot to cook for them.
Jane, thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're welcome. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate getting the chance to tell it.
Oh, yeah, and I think that I feel I knew, well, I know you well, and I know you as a storyteller
Mhm.
and somebody that would know this, and so that was no surprise. But you do that so wonderfully,
Oh, thank you.
and I think it's a gift. I really love
I
doing that.
really feel like I feel so close to this character that it is not that hard to sort of step in um, and impersonate her, sort of.
But you
For
didn't do that. You didn't learn that in 5 minutes.
her.
You came
This is true.
to know her. You came to know
I
her.
came to know her. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll look forward to ask you to come back again,
Oh, thank you.
especially
Always
if
a
you have
pleasure.
another character. We old greedy people. It's wonderful. Thank you. I think
Thank you so
that
much.
you're going to find people wanting to hear that story.
I would like to get to do it again. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye.